I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to introduce my friend and colleague, Seema Gajwani. I've had the pleasure of working with Seema for almost a decade, first when she was a program officer at the Public Welfare Foundation. One of Seema's priorities there was elevating the issue of pretrial justice reform. And as a funder, she was in a position where she could have dictated how that would happen, and those of us who were grantees would follow suit. But that's not Seema's style. Instead, she reached out to people across the country, including me, convinced us that we had a contribution to make on this issue. She brought us together, she listened to what we had to say, and she supported us as we found meaningful solutions. That collective effort helped launch a new generation of bail reform in America, and it inspired and mobilized many people. That phone call from Seema is the reason why pretrial justice is my life these days, and I continue to be grateful for that. So when Seema decided that she wanted to be back on the front lines of youth justice, it did not surprise me at all that the way she approached that work was to reach out to people, convince them that they have a meaningful contribution to make, to bring them together, to listen, and to support them as they find meaningful solutions. She's going to share more about that work that she does with us this morning. Please join me in welcoming Special Counsel for Juvenile Justice Reform and Chief of the Restorative Justice Program Section in the DC Office of the Attorney General, Seema Gajwani.
5 years ago, I was a restorative justice skeptic. I'm going to just put that out there first. And I was the worst kind of critic. I both didn't really know what restorative justice was, and I was also pretty sure that it would never work. And then one day, I was at Ballou Senior High, which is a large public school in Washington, D.C., and a woman, Ivy Hilton, was holding a restorative justice circle and invited me to watch. There had been a fight between two high school students in a classroom. Actually, it wasn't much of a fight at all. One student just beat the lights out of another student, punching him repeatedly in the face and not stopping until a teacher had to literally pull him off. It had been a few days, but when that smaller student had arrived in our conference room, you could still see the swelling on the side of his face and the blood red in the white part of his eye. I'll call him Darren. So Darren came in first with his mother and his aunt. They were really upset. They were talking about how bad his face looked and his eye on Friday. They were really angry. Soon the other high school student arrived. I'll call him Malik, with his mother and his mother's fiance. And the restorative justice facilitator had all of us sit down in chairs that were arranged in a circle with no table in the middle. And after introductions and ground rules, she asked Malik to tell the group what happened from the beginning. Now, Malik is way bigger than Darren. He's both taller and thicker, just a way bigger kid. And that made sense to me. Bigger kid pummels smaller, weaker boy. End of story. But then Malik started to talk, really softly. He was hunched over in his chair, like awkward and nervous, and he wouldn't look up. He kept saying my name, he said. He and the other kids. But it wasn't my name, it was something else. It turned out that they were making fun of his name, and that they had been for weeks, maybe months. That came out later. So Ivy turned to Darren and said, Darren, tell the group what happened from the beginning. Nothing, he said. I was just sitting there. I called out to him, and he came over and started punching me in the face. Then Ivy had the group go around the circle and comment on what we heard Darren saying, and also what it made us think of from our own lives. One person said they didn't think Darren was telling the full story. Another person talked about how when he was younger, he was made fun of and how that was hurtful to him. And then it came around to Darren's mother. And Darren's mother tells the group, Darren is a joker. He thinks he's funny. He likes to joke around, but he doesn't appreciate how he can hurt people's feelings and get hurt himself. And so we continued to talk as a circle like that for an hour and a half. Both mothers talked about the facts that they didn't raise their children like this and they didn't condone violence. Malik's mother talked about the fact that she worked 2 jobs, commuted by bus, that she had to miss work on Friday when she got the phone call from the school, and then again today for this meeting, and her boss would be really mad. Continued around the circle. And Darren's mother said to Darren, people look at black boys in Southeast DC and they assume that they're violent and dangerous, and I know that you're not violent and dangerous. She said, I just don't want you to end up dead. And she started to cry. I don't want you to be a number. As the circle progressed, both parents apologized to the other parents for what their sons had done. And Malik's mother told Darren's mother, when I see you on the street, you'll know that you have a friend. She said, I heard a lot of rumors about this fight since Friday. I heard the boy called my son a B, that your family was bringing their people to this meeting. She said, I woke up this morning and I said, Lord help me, I'm going down to Baloo to brawl today, and that's why I brought my fiance. But now I see that that's not what this is about. She said, I don't think this should have happened, but I want to thank these boys for bringing our families together. Now, the 2 boys were pretty uncomfortable basically the whole time. Malik found it really hard to admit what he did to the person who he hurt in front of this group, especially his mother. And Darren was forced to admit the role that he and his friends played in taunting Malik. But it also seemed like the boys didn't often hear their mothers speak openly about their hopes and their fears for their sons, because when the moms cried, you could see the pain on the faces of the boys. It was the adults around this circle, the community itself, that talked to Malik about how violence wasn't the appropriate response, but they did so with compassion and with empathy. Malik's mother's fiancé said at some point that he spent some of his free time at a boxing gym and he offered to take the boys there to channel their emotions in a more positive way. And Darren's aunt said to Darren, what are you going to do the next time your friends want to make fun of Malik? And he said, don't worry about it. And she didn't let it go. She said, pretend I'm your friend. And I say, Darren, let's go do this. What are you going to say? And he said, nah, in character. It's not like that. We're cool. Leave him alone. And they went back and forth. They actually practiced. Eventually, the boys apologized for what they'd done. And Ivy said, what's that again? She made them do it again, the second time with eye contact. The group came together they came to agreement about what Darren and Malik had to do moving forward. Each promise was written down on a piece of paper and signed. And then that was it. Everyone got up, the moms hugged, the boys did that shoulder bump thing that they do, and everyone left. And I was floored. Darren was hurt with injuries. In DC, Malik would have been charged with assault. Previously, I'd been a public defender for 6 years. I knew what Malik would have gone through had he gone through the court system. It was a path that many of my clients had gone through before. After the fight at school, court Malik would have been handcuffed and questioned and arrested and taken to court eventually. And at court, he would sit in the back of the courtroom in a cell block for hours waiting for his case to be called. And for a few minutes during that time, Court Malik would be visited by his court-appointed lawyer, somebody like me. asking about the details of his case and the details of his life. To court Malik, his lawyer is the one person who knows the worst of what he's done, and this is what she will tell him. We can beat this charge. The government's evidence isn't that strong. Don't admit that you did anything, and don't talk about the case. Let me do all the talking. As defense attorneys, we have to do this. We have to build trust quickly and show our clients and their families that we're on their side. We're investing into a bank account that will pay off later when we have to have hard conversations about trial versus plea offers. But we're also inadvertently undermining what the research shows is fundamental to a child changing his behavior, taking responsibility for his actions. Eventually, Court Malik's case will be called. And then a judge, prosecutor, defense attorney, and probation officer will all discuss his fate. None of these people know Malik or his family. To the judge and the prosecutor, Court Malik will be what they read about on the police report. And what I saw when I first met Malik, a large teenage boy who violently assaulted another boy in a classroom with no physical provocation. It's an assault, it's violent, it's an African American boy. We've seen this story before. The judge and prosecutor will never hear about Malik's struggles as a painfully shy teenager who lost his father at 8 years old and who takes really good care of his little sister. In fact, to the prosecutor, when he sees Court Malik, he will think about Darren, the victim of the crime, and Darren's mother, who's really angry, and the community. Because as a prosecutor, it's his job to bring justice to the victim and to the community. And so he will prosecute fully. Back in court, a probation officer will stand up and read all the worst things about Malik to everyone in the courtroom, including Malik and his family. Mediocre grades, poor attendance at school, maybe hanging out with the wrong crowd. To Malik, at his age, what he thinks of himself and who he is inordinately influenced by what others think about him. His self-esteem is fragile. His psychological development is vulnerable. And standing there in a courtroom in a jumpsuit, silenced and ashamed, Court Malik will hear what others think of him from those adults. And then he'll deliver, and we will blame him for it. Eventually, Malik will enter into a plea agreement. Now, this plea will have been negotiated between lawyers, and a prosecutor will subconsciously transfer his distrust of the defense attorney to Court Malik and assume that Malik lacks remorse and morals. The prosecutor will never know that Malik felt really bad after what he did, or that he would have taken responsibility for it on the first day of court if he could have. Malik, in court, will never have to apologize to Darren for what he did. And Darren won't have to apologize for his role, however minor. The judge will ask if he committed the crime, and his lawyer will lean over and whisper in his ear and advise him to say yes in order to take the plea. This won't feel like accountability to Malik. And it probably won't feel like justice to the victim either. And Court Malik will return to school. And his problem between Darren and him, that won't have been addressed. But now Darren and his friends may be emboldened, or maybe they're preparing for retaliation. It turns out that the very nature of our adversarial court system produces a Court Malik who is more wounded, who is angrier, and who is more likely to harm again. And we have all seen this happen. But it didn't happen. What really happened in real life was that two boys and their families came to resolution with accountability and fairness in an hour-and-a-half conversation. You can see why I was floored. I work at the Office of the Attorney General for the District of Columbia. We are the exclusive prosecutor of all juvenile crime for the entire city of Washington, D.C. In 2017, D.C. Attorney General Karl Racine launched the Restorative Justice Program in our office. Since then, 5 full-time restorative justice facilitators and I have held over 120 restorative justice circles for crime. We have successfully used restorative justice for stabbings, for carjackings, and burglaries. Our most common cases in restorative justice are probably like your most common cases, assaults and robberies. Which is not to say that restorative justice always works. It doesn't. But where it doesn't work, we simply hand the case back to the prosecutor for traditional prosecution. And of the over 120 cases that we've used restorative justice for, only 7 have been returned for prosecution. Some of our victims, they choose to participate in restorative justice because they are generous and charitable. But some victims choose restorative justice even though they're really angry, because they need something that the court system can't provide for them. Maybe they have to walk around in the world and they're fearful of seeing the person who hurt them again. Or maybe they are worried about retribution for prosecution. Many of our victims want to tell the person who hurt them how the crime impacted their lives and how badly they were hurt. And almost all of our victims want to see for themselves if the young person is truly sorry for what he did. Research on restorative justice from all over the world shows that when young people go through a restorative justice process, they build empathy and consequential thinking. And they are less likely to commit a crime again. In our office, we are just embarking on a recidivism study, but we have been doing surveys from the beginning, and what they show is that 90% of participants of a restorative justice circle would do it again in a similar situation themselves, and 95% would recommend it to a friend. And so you have to ask yourselves, if we continue to get poor outcomes from our current adversarial justice system, why do we hold on to it? Well, because the procedural protections in our existing justice system are brilliant for somebody who wants to contest their guilt, who didn't do it, who wants to go to trial. That's what court was made for. Only we almost never go to trial anymore. It's a beautiful system for 5% of cases, and it's a tragic one for the other 95%. And so, in DC, we check. Under the protections of confidentiality, our restorative justice facilitators check with the young person accused of crime and his family and his lawyer first, because we know that where a young person is willing to take responsibility, if we as a system encourage them not to, we are making it less likely that they will change their behavior in the future. And what I've seen in my office is that prosecutors understand this. Once we invite a prosecutor to sit in and observe a restorative justice circle, he will send us more cases, including more serious cases, as an alternative to prosecution. In fact, almost everyone who we invite to sit in on a circle, be it a prosecutor or a judge or a defense attorney, afterwards they say that they can't believe after the trauma of crime that people can see each other as human beings and come to resolution. Justice is starting to look different in Washington, D.C. Malik and Darren, they went to a boxing gym together several times after their circle. Their families became friends, and the boys never fought again. And me, my first restorative justice facilitation was an assault case. My second one was a sexual harm case, then a co-respondent robbery, then threats. Again and again and again and again, I saw that with facilitation, where the parties are willing, people can come together and solve their problems with accountability and fairness. It may be that we need to bring the weight of our adversarial justice process to bear on a case, on a child. But our current justice system presumes that we need to do so in every case, because court is the default. But what if, instead, as a default, we gave victims and offenders a chance to work things out together first, even where somebody did something really bad? What if, instead, we gave real Malik a chance?